Hi, friends. My name is Bailey, and I'm the host of the Y Project podcast. I am so excited for you to be here. Before we get started, I just want to address one issue for our visual podcasters. Yes, my hair right now is dyed pink. No, it is not dyed pink in the video. Yes, I love it, and I hope you love it too. Now that that is addressed, I wanted to go ahead and talk about today's content. Today we have a wonderful guest named Andrea, and she talks about her healing journey and resources that helped her get through her healing journey throughout her life. Some content that will be discussed today, though, is pretty heavy, so I wanted to give a disclaimer at the beginning. Today we will be talking about childhood sexual abuse, alcoholism with a father, and also betrayal in marriage. If any of these topics are sensitive or triggering for you, go ahead and click off this video and take care of yourself. I hope to see you in a future one. But if you are continuing to listen, thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy today's guest. Well, today's guest, we have on Andrea on the Y Project podcast, and I'm so excited. Andrea is my great aunt, so I know her very well, and I'm excited to just learn more about her story today. Andrea, is there anything that you want to just tell us about? Like any fun facts or anything to break the ice or
Well, you said I'm your great aunt, and I'm a nurse. I work for the VA, and I'm married, and I have four grandsons with one grandchild. We don't know what it is yet, on the way.
what are some fun things that you like to do when you have any?
Travel. I love anything water sports, like snorkeling and kayaking and all the fun stuff. Yeah.
Well, before Andrea moved here, you lived in California for a
Yes.
long time.
Yep.
And we would go visit them. And that was my favorite trips, was to come visit you guys. We go to Disneyland or just go to the beach. And yeah. Where did you grow up, Andrea?
I grew up in Washington State, a little town called Capelson, and it's towards the base of Mount Rainier. So we were up in the mountains, and not up in the mountains. We were in the country, and we lived in a house surrounded by a bunch of summer cabins. So we really just had rain over this big, massive area that we could play in and imaginate anything we wanted.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what was your family like growing up?
So I had my mom and my dad. My dad was a truck driver. He was gone a lot, I remember. And then my brother. I had one brother. He's 2 years younger than me. So yeah, my mom she was around a lot. She worked as well, some jobs during the time, but parents divorced when I was 17. My dad was raised in an alcoholic family, and he was an alcoholic himself. Um, so yeah, that plays into the dynamic of what we'll probably be talking about today too.
How would you describe your childhood?
I feel like it was what I always describe it as, like country bumpkin, because
That's funny.
because we grew up far away from most of our friends.
Yeah.
And we grew up on a lake, so we were the fun place to come to in the summertime. But I remember the bus rides into school. We were the furthest one out, and so we were isolated, my brother and I, from a lot of the things that other of our peers were probably more like. They were more in the mix of, like, they could get to a store really easy and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were out there, and we had to, like, the outside was our playground. And back then, I mean, that was a long time ago, the 70s and 80s. So it was way different. Like, you could just go outside and play for all day and not have anyone being really worried about what's going on.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna kind of get into some more stuff.
Okay.
So I'll just start with the first question. This is kind of a heavy loaded question, so you can take this wherever you want.
Okay.
But what challenges or experiences from your past have shaped you into the person that you've become today?
So I have complex PTSD, if we're talking about mental health.
Yeah.
Um, and I can put those into three main categories for me where those stem from. So I had, as I mentioned, alcoholic father, um, who was absent a lot in my younger years, but then he got a job that brought him more local, like he was home, supposed to be home every night. Um, so that's one component, is having to tiptoe kind of around his
Mm-hmm.
um, alcoholism, and the dynamic was just tiptoeing around dad. We did, for the most part, he was a um, pretty happy, which we would say happy drunk, like, but he could flip like that, and we never knew what we were going to do that. And then I had childhood sexual abuse from the age of 5 to about 9 years old from a family member who was not that much older than me. He was about 6 years older than me, um, old enough to know better, but um, not old enough for it to be, in my mind, something like really intentionally perversive. Maybe just
Mm-hmm.
more exploratory, and didn't really,
Curious, maybe
yeah,
in a way.
yeah. In my childhood, those are the two main things that I dealt with. And then as an adult, um, I had betrayal trauma in my marriage. So
Mm-hmm.
those three things led into what they call complex PTSD, which is something that, with regular PTSD, it's usually an event that happened to you. Something like, you could be in a car accident, or you could have experienced a fire, or some other traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
But with complex PTSD, it's over a period of years and multiple different um, sources of the trauma.
I'd love to first dive into the alcoholism with your father.
Mhm.
When did you like start noticing? Like what when were you able to comprehend that that was a problem for him?
I think in junior high is when I started to realize. I think I always kind of innately knew that this was unsafe in certain situations, right? But
Mm-hmm.
um, in junior high, I was introduced to some Al Anon programs because I had a friend whose dad was an alcoholic, and she was like, "Do you want to go to these with me?" So I started learning then about what is the unhealthy behaviors and how to
Mm.
deal with it. Um, and then just being more keenly aware. When you grow up in that dynamic, it was really weird, because as an adult, when you're around others and you're talking about your childhood, and you're saying, "Oh yeah, this is how I grew up," or this funny thing, and it was funny to me. Like, everything was funny. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
kind of coped. Like, laughter was my coping, and people would stop and be like, "That is not funny. Like,
Mm.
that you had to go through that. That was not funny." And I would be like taken aback and go, "Oh, I guess that," but to me that was normal.
Yeah.
So I didn't I didn't know it wasn't funny. So then I started to evaluate more as an adult. Like,
Mm.
okay, that some of these things need more of a look at, I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
How do you think that like having a father that's not super present affected you as you developed and as you aged? Like, did it have any effects towards relationship with men or boys, or any effects with just like relationships in general for you?
I think it absolutely played into, I think that, along with the sexual abuse, played into me being very seeking after male attention.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Never, I don't know. My dad was very, had expectations for my brother and I, that we kind of, this perfection state, right? My brother and I weren't very like athletic or anything, so it was always academics. And he had this expectation that we were like these straight A kids, and whenever we went places, we were like the good kids. We always had to be really in line and
Mm.
behaving, and we would get in trouble if we weren't. And it was all image. He wanted
Mm-hmm.
it to look like everything was put together, but it was such a dichotomy because I'm like, but I live in this world where it's not perfect and you're not perfect, Dad. Like you
Mm-hmm.
have all these coping
Yeah.
mechanisms that are so unhealthy, but the expectation was always for us to have that. So I think it shaped me in a way that I had to be, um, there was a lot of shame, lots of
Mm-hmm.
shame. So I was quiet about anything that I felt shameful about. And, um, yeah, the perfection, always trying so hard to meet this ideal and never feeling
Mm-hmm.
you could measure up. So,
The hypocrisy
right.
of the confusion for a child. That's so
Yes.
hard to like try to undo as an adult. Like that's super because you're like,
Yeah.
why do I have certain behaviors or why am I have certain triggers that aren't
Right.
normal or like I don't understand why little things mean like a big deal to me or at least that's kind of like
Yes.
how I've seen a lot of people feel. I don't know, like I don't want to speak
Yeah.
for you.
I think I'm still figuring it out with
Yeah.
that one. I've just started to like kind of reevaluate that relationship because I've spent time trying to reevaluate the other things so much that like trying to figure out where that having an alcoholic father played in, um, is kind of something more new that I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out. Recently, I've noticed, when I visit my dad now, I go into this like little kid kind of
Mm-hmm.
like frozen state of like, I don't want to upset the balance here. I don't want to
Yeah.
upset anything. Easy way to revert into being that child again
Yeah, absolutely.
instead of being the grown up I am now. And I know healthy behaviors, but
Hmm.
I kind of revert back.
How do you think his like example of like what a father shouldn't be, like how has that played into your role now as like a grandma and like you have, I guess Jared's technically your stepson, but
Yeah.
you basically just raised him.
Yeah.
So like how was parenting and like grandparenting played into that for you? Were there certain things that you noticed or things that you were like, I will
Um,
not do this? Or do you feel like you parent a certain way or are a grandparent a certain way because of that?
I think there were good and bad things. I think there were things that I learned that
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I absolutely don't want to do. So I never drank, right? I didn't
Mm-hmm.
ever introduce that into, our life. And also being, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, not it's something that typically would be in our life anyway. So,
Yeah.
um, and so I never introduced kind of those addictive qualities as that. And I think I was more present because I tried to listen more to cues that I would see that I
Mm-hmm.
don't think my dad was ever honed in on, like
Yeah.
never. And even my mom, I think to an extent, because she was dealing with so much having to deal with him and
Mm-hmm.
her own things. But then also, there are things that I didn't do perfectly either. I think that whole idea of perfectionism played a part, and I had probably expectations for Jared,
Mm-hmm.
my son, that were probably a little more harsh than maybe somebody else would have been if they hadn't had
Yeah.
that. I am a big proponent. So I do attend 12-step meetings now, and um, a lot of the traditional 12-step programs, like I mentioned, Al Anon, focus on this idea of codependency, and I do see some qualities in myself that were codependent. Some things that I learned,
Mm-hmm.
um, like, and codependent meaning that I really depend on other people to supply me with my kind of security and feelings of,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm okay. Um, but I have been introduced to a new, um, theory recently in the last few years called prodependence. The original part of Al Anon, like when if you go back and look at the history of it, they really blamed the spouses or family members for the alcoholism in the
Oh
families.
wow.
Yeah. Um, I just don't think that they knew enough back then, because this was the 1960s when they were trying to
Mhm.
develop a program for families and spouses
Yeah.
that really only just mimicked the program they had for the alcoholic. So the steps are really similar. And step 4 of that is talking about a fearless moral inventory of yourself. So you're
Mhm.
kind of like looking at your character weaknesses and stuff. And I don't think we have to do that. So the idea of codependence is that we're not telling the families and um, that they're the reason for this.
Mm.
We're saying, of course, you reacted in this way because you cared about this person. Of
Mhm.
course, you didn't. It's all about more self compassion. So that's
Mm.
one thing that I think is really dear to my heart is this idea of codependence. It's by Dr. Robert Weiss. He's the author of Codependence. So that's one thing that I would suggest anyone read. It's
That's
more up
so
to date.
cool.
And they have groups
Yeah.
now that are based off of the codependence model. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's so cool because I feel like it helps people to take back like their agency within
Yes.
the situation where they don't feel shameful for what's happening to the family
Right.
member, and instead like it's very humanizing in a way where they
Yes.
can be like everyone's having a hard time. This is
Yes.
really difficult,
Yeah.
which I don't know what it's like to deal with an addict, but it just sounds like it allows for everyone to have their own experience and that it's okay that they felt a certain way.
It really turned things around for me because I would get
Mhm.
lost in the programs, the 12-step programs, because I'm like, I don't, what do I have to talk about my character weaknesses? How does this apply to it? And of course, we
Mm.
all need to look at our character weaknesses, but in the realm of this, I couldn't, I always got stuck there. It's a turning point and such a positive one for families and spouses.
So speaking of relationships then, I want to kind of switch over to the sexual abuse that you
Mhm.
went through at a young age.
I've done a lot of work in this realm. So when I was about 5 or 6, 5 years old, I did have an experience with some neighbor kids that inappropriate touching and things like that. It didn't really stick with me. I didn't really even remember that till later when I was kind of processing all this. But then when I was 6, I have an uncle that is just 6 years older than me who spent a lot of time with my brother and I. He was like our babysitter. He was just like my mom's youngest brother, and she um, felt like he was just like an older sibling to us. So he was around us a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember being groomed a little bit as much as somebody that age, like he must have been about 12 or something,
Mhm.
could groom somebody. Um, but he would take certain steps to see how far he could get. And then it became just like a lot of games with not just myself. I wasn't the only one involved. I had
Mm.
cousins that were involved too. And at the time when I was younger, I just felt like I was doing something naughty. I didn't realize at that time that it was
Mhm.
abuse. So I held a lot of shame about it. I remember going back and looking at some of my diaries that I wrote then, and I wrote a lot in code about what I was going through with
Mhm.
a lot of shame attached to it.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I think I was in junior high and went to some sleepover at a friend's house, and all the girls were talking about these different experiences they had had with sexual abuse. And I was like, well, I had same experiences, but I didn't realize that was abuse. Like I had never
Yeah.
attached that name to it. And I kind of just filed it back in my brain and didn't really think more about it, just that I had been involved in this stuff. When I was, I can't explain this, when I was 9 years old, I was baptized by my grandfather. I remember being very aware when they asked me the questions before baptism.
Mm.
I felt they were asking because they knew something. They must know something about what's going on in my life because they would ask some pretty personal questions. And um, no one knew. But at that time, that's when I started to really think about like, I don't want to be involved in these naughty things anymore
Mm.
at
Mhm.
9. And things continued to happen. And there was one point where I said, I ran away from the place where we were all in this little camping trailer, and I ran out into the field of my grandpa's house and just got on my knees and prayed. I was like, I've got to pray to God because now I've been baptized and I want to do the right thing. And I got a very distinct impression that I should go in and tell my grandfather what was going on. And my uncle ran after me, and I told him, this is what I'm supposed to do. And he said, if you do that, you will break up the entire family.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, well, I don't want to break up the whole family. Okay, I won't do this. But from that moment on, nothing happened again. I think he got the message. This shouldn't be happening anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the moment that it stopped. I was
At
about,
that point, how old were you
I
and how
think I
old was he?
was either 9 or 10. So he must have been 15 or 16 at that
Okay.
time. There was one other incident earlier on where I remember dissociating from my body, hovering above myself, watching what was happening to me, and in my mind saying, no, I don't want this happening. No, no, no. And I actually did say no, and it came out. And he told me, I'm not doing anything to you that you don't want me to do. So if you don't want to play like this, you need to leave the room. And there were other kids, and I remember thinking, I'm pushed out now. I don't get to play with the other kids unless I agree
Mm-hmm.
to participate.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like at that point I had made a choice to
Mm-hmm.
do this, and I remember having a lot of shame about that too. But skipping ahead to high school, there was a counselor just pulled me in one day to ask me about my classes and stuff. And I don't know why she felt prompted, but she asked me if I'd had any abuse. I told her what had happened, and I proceeded over the next 4 years to like see her a lot. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I would never give up the name. She wanted to know the name so they could do something about it. And I would never do it because I was so afraid if I said anything, I would break up my family. So,
Mm-hmm.
but she was really, really instrumental in helping me deal with a lot of that and recognizing that it was abuse at that
Mm-hmm.
time. There was a pivotal moment. I always believed that if I did tell my mom that something would be done about it. I kind of believed that I would break up the family because I kind of believed him, but I also believed if I told somebody, I would be believed. Um, there was a point when I was 17 and I was upset because my mom was waiting up for me one day when I came home really late. It was about 2 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't expecting her to be waiting up. She usually wasn't. And so she was waiting up for me and said, where have you been? And I said, oh, well, I was telling this boy all about, it wasn't a boy, he was a man. He was
Mm-hmm.
probably in his 30s, somebody I should not have been hanging out with at 17. I said, I was telling him all about how your brother molested me, and caught my mom completely off guard. And
Mm-hmm.
she just, what? And she was trying to guess which brother because she has two brothers. And I told her who it was. And she said to me, are you sure? And at 17, I'm like, oh my gosh, she does not believe me.
Mm-hmm.
All these stories I've heard of other people
Yeah.
saying that their parents don't believe them, and I completely shut down and I wouldn't answer any other questions. And I remember her coming to me that night and saying, well, this was probably just some childhood games. We're just going to sweep it under the rug. I remember those words. And I was like, oh, that's what we're going to do. Okay. And for the next year, my whole senior year of high school was just a mess of me.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't care anymore about my body. I'd give it away to anybody. And I, I just thought I don't have any worth.
Mm-hmm.
So that was hard. But I can say a year later, my mom came back to me and said that she'd been to counseling, and her and my other uncle tried to do a completely like intervention without any training or skills to do
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
So they tried to do that, and they also included my brother, who I told them it had happened to my brother as well, but I never told my brother I had said anything. So
Mhm.
he was taken aback. He was completely surprised when he knew people knew, and he denied everything, which I totally expected him to do. But when they did come back to me that year later, I was like, "Wait, what is going on? You said we were sweeping this under the rug.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not prepared to open this up now." Like, I was
Yeah.
really angry about it. But um, my mom asked if I would write a letter explaining what happened, and I did. And um, her and my other uncle, confronted him, my abuser, and not in a very healthy way. But when I look back on it, I'm like, that felt very protective. Like somebody
Mm.
finally believed
Mhm.
me. And I don't think I would have a relationship with my mom if she hadn't have done that. So I'm really, really grateful to her for that. And I tell her almost every time I see her
Mhm.
about that. So that happened. I didn't get put in therapy or anything. I was 18. I was living my best life, right? When you're
Mhm.
18. And I kind of stuffed it down for a while. I mean, I knew that it had happened, and I would tell people I had abuse and stuff, but I never did any really like good therapy about it. Um, so it did split my mom's family in half. Half of them believed me and half didn't. So
Mhm.
he was right. It split everybody in half. But much when I started to break down and knew that I needed to get professional help.
Mhm.
So that's when I started, probably my early 30s. I went to a therapist and started to work on that.
That's a long time to like
Yeah.
learn how to cope by yourself. When did you marry Uncle Russ? How old were you?
I was 23 when I met him. We were married when I was 26. Yeah.
26.
Yeah.
So did that like play a role at all in your marriage? Or like when you married Uncle Russ, you took in a 7-year-old son? Was Jared
Yeah.
7? Do you feel like not working through things at that point, did that play into your marriage or into your relationships with a new son and husband at
Yeah.
all?
I'm sure it did. And I was honest with him at the
Yeah.
beginning to say, like, I've had these issues. And I'm sure it did. It's hard to take out all the pieces of what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
because when I got together with your uncle, like, it was a custody battle for Jared. We got Jared because he had gone through his own abuse. So all the focus was on him. So all the focus went there. But I'm sure I it did play a role in probably our intimacy too, and
Mm-hmm.
just um, maybe me not wanting to give as much as other people. It's hard to look back
It's
and
hard to
know
know
to
engage.
unpack
Yeah.
all that. Yeah, but definitely it played a role later on in our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, definitely didn't go to therapy for several years later. So
Mm.
my mental health was starting to break down. I was having a really hard time sleeping. That was the first thing. I'd be staying up all night and then sleeping during the day. It was just really unhealthy. I
Mm-hmm.
remember that. And then, and my husband was in the Navy. He was gone a lot. So there was just so many different dynamics
Yeah,
playing into it.
totally.
Yeah. Um, that when we finally we got back to Washington State, we got um, stationed there. And when I was talking to the doctor about sleep aids and stuff, she was like, maybe you should go see this guy I know, this therapist. And that's when I started going, okay, yeah, I probably should do that, and
Mm-hmm.
started working through it. I remember one particular thing about that therapist that I really liked. I was so caught in shame and believing this was all my fault. And he said, you were the one who got everything to stop. because you stood up and said this was wrong. He's like, maybe you're the one who saved a bunch of those other kids in there. And I was like, wait a second.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
had never looked at it that way. And that's when I started to like turn things around.
Did you decide to do therapy later because you didn't have the resources or understanding? Was there like a stigma around therapy for you?
I think growing up in the decades that I did, right, there wasn't a lot of talk about mental health. You
Mhm.
know, in the 80s, it wasn't like, you know, if you went to a therapist, that was like, oh gosh, something's really wrong with you,
Yeah.
like, um, I don't think I would have been opposed to it because when my mom finally came around, she had gone to a therapist, but she had divorced my dad like the year before too. So there was a lot of stuff going on
Mm,
um,
mhm.
in our family, um, but it wasn't offered to me. And when I was 18, I probably could have gotten access through the health insurance that I was on with my parents and stuff, but I didn't know how to pursue that. There was
Yeah.
no direction there at all. So, um, yeah, I didn't really know where to go until I was older and I knew something about our health insurance and that what I
Mhm.
could get and
Yeah,
where I could go.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. With therapy, what was that healing experience like?
I will say I have been to many a therapist now.
Mhm.
And at the time when I said that, what he said to me, that therapist was there and was a good fit for some of the things that I needed at the time. And
Mm,
he did challenge my thinking on things to go, wow, okay, maybe I'm not as broken as I think I am. Maybe I do have some strengths that are inherent to me that I can lean on.
mhm.
And that was really good. Um, we moved a lot because of my husband's uh, being in the military. So um, there came a point, so I can step, I guess, into this a little bit, where I started to have difficulties in my marriage. And he wasn't the right therapist for that. I think you just have to keep going and finding the therapist that's going to work for your situation. And there are so many different types
Yeah.
that are so specialized in different things, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, my husband and I found a really, really wonderful person who did EMDR in
Mm,
um, San Diego. And we both did it. And it was pretty fascinating how they can unlock some things.
yes.
Yeah. You just have to keep going.
Yeah.
And there's different therapists for different things. So now I'm working with like
Mhm.
a trauma therapist to help me through all of that
Yeah.
stuff, who's been
Yeah.
really helpful.
That is such a great point that you bring up, that sometimes a therapist will work for a while and then it just isn't a good fit and
Yeah.
you have to change, and sometimes the first therapist that you meet isn't a great fit,
Yeah.
and it can be very discouraging sometimes,
Yes.
but like I think that that brings a lot of hope for people to know that like it's normal to have to
Yeah.
switch therapists throughout different seasons of life. Like if you break your arm, you're not going to go see a physical therapist to work that out. You're going
Right.
to go see a doctor for them to set it, right? And
Right.
it's the same thing. And our mind, I think we forget, is so complex. Like we
Yes.
literally have two different sides of our brain that does different things. So
Yeah.
it's like of course we would need different therapists that specialize in certain things. Well, that kind of just leads us into talking about the trauma within your marriage.
Okay. About my husband's betrayal.
Did you feel like you just like instinctually
I
like
have a
knew?
lot of moments where I instinctually know things, and I really do believe it's because of the spirit tells me,
Mhm.
you know, I would call it the spirit. Some people might call it a gut feeling. Whatever it
Yeah.
is for you, trust those
Yeah.
feelings. That's what I would tell
Yeah.
anyone. Because for me, when I trust those feelings, they are always right. I think I hold on to a lot of anger because I feel like if I had been able to do something about it, then
Mm,
it wouldn't have gotten to the point, but I can't say that for sure. He was willing to work on it. He was like, I remember him saying, no, I'm not going to pursue that. To my husband's credit, he's done a ton of work on himself to figure out why he was doing that. He also had sexual addiction
Mm-hmm.
that is what led to that. One therapist has said, it's not this linear line of like you get better. It's more of like a line that looks like this and goes
Mm-hmm.
back. So there were like he wanted to work on the marriage, but then he would fall back into patterns, and that's something he'll always have to be actively involved in fighting.
I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to this are like, will have opinions or thoughts or judgments of like, well, I would just leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that happened to them or in their marriage. And so I'm curious to know like what that healing process for you felt like why you decided to stay and to continue forward within this relationship.
Before this happened to me, I would have been one of the people like, just leave. Why are you staying with somebody? For me, um, very spiritual. I was working in the temple. I had gotten that job, or it's not really a paid job, but
Yeah.
I'd gotten to work at the temple a few months before I found out about my husband's betrayal. And I know that was a God thing. He put me there. That's where I needed to be. Because I don't know that I would have visited the temple as much
Mm.
if I hadn't been working there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I went to the temple, it was always, all my shifts were with that thought in my mind, like, what am I supposed to do in this situation? Two things. My husband was willing to do the work. So that makes a huge difference. If somebody's willing to do the work and stay, um, then I'm going to give it a try. And the second thing was when I was at the temple, I would go in with my heart saying, "Tell me how I'm supposed to leave this man." And it was always, "Give him a year." And so I would go, "This is not what was in my head."
Yeah.
Because obviously in my head I was like, "No, tell me the steps how I'm supposed to leave." It was, "Give him a year." And I would give it a year and I'd reevaluate. And I'm like, "We're in a better spot." And I had to do this so many times because then something else would happen. Because with addiction, it's never just this great path to glory,
Yeah.
it's so messy. And then I would go back to the temple and it was just like, okay, I've done all this stuff. Like, what am I supposed to do now? And it was, give him a year and he would improve. And each time it was like we were getting a little bit better, understanding things a little bit more. But I had to stay true to my faith. I had to put God in my center.
Mm.
And I had to learn to put him in the center instead of my husband. And when I did that, it was easier to do the work and to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been so many ups and downs, but I never wanted to leave either. I think that if I was supposed to leave, God would have given that to me. And I know women that have had that feeling and they've had to leave.
Yeah.
So, and I don't fault anyone for ever having to leave their marriage for
Mm-hmm.
this. Everyone's story is so different. It's just that mine happened to be that I had a guy that was willing to do the work and God said stay. That's really what it
Yeah.
comes down to.
Yeah.
I now see a trauma specialist. She is trained in APSATs, so that's like Association of Partners of uh, Sexual Addiction Trauma Specialists or something like that. Um, and she is also um, she's trauma specialized and PTSD specialized. So I found somebody that had all these credentials that could help me through this, and
Mm-hmm.
she's been phenomenal. I also am on the board of directors for an organization called Her Wings Unfold, and it's a brainchild of a really good friend of mine, and she is practicing advocacy and help for people with 4A behavior, which would be addiction, abuse, abandonment, and oh gosh, I'm on the board of directors. Another A. I will get it. I'll get it to you.
Sounds good.
But she also hosts a trauma sensitive 12-step program, which is based off of the model of prodependence. So it helps anyone who's involved in any of those 4A behaviors come and talk, have a community of other people going through that same thing. And she hosts several different meetings throughout the week, different days and times. I host one on Tuesday evenings at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. That has been really helpful. I think community, having other people that have experienced the same thing, even if their outcome isn't the same, they know what it feels like. That has helped me tremendously. Having that specialized therapist. Um, I attended a retreat last summer that was powerful. It's a free, absolutely free retreat that's put on by Sapria. You can go to sapria.org and go to their retreat page, and then you just apply for it, and someone will reach out to you. And just make sure that you're in the right spot in your life to attend this retreat, because it's a lot of psychoeducational stuff. But you spend 4 days out at a mansion, and when I'm saying mansion, this place is amazing. I didn't expect it to be as beautiful as it is. The people that developed it, just philanthropic hearts that bought this property, had money and bought this property, and this is what they want to focus on. So women come from all over to attend these retreats. It's 4 days, Monday through Thursday. They hold them, I think, 3 out of the 4 weeks each month. And you get a lot of education. You get like support group every day. You get
What type of women should like attend these
anyone
retreats?
who has had any sexual abuse under the age of 18. So it's not for adults who've had abuse, but for anyone who's had childhood sexual abuse. And it's just for women right now. I think in the future they're hoping to open up a group for men, which would be so healing. I think men need the same type of thing. Men need community too. My husband has found community in groups, and he's gone to a therapy group, and then he goes to 12-step groups. So that's been like, I think that just really is what makes a difference, is finding community. And what I love to promote is anything that's free, because therapy is not cheap.
Yeah,
so
it's not.
so the TS12 and on groups are free. This retreat is free, and you get so much information. You get access to like materials for 6 months after the retreat too, that Supriya puts on.
That is so
Yeah.
cool.
But also, one of my favorite artists, singers, is Jewel, and she has a song or a message, because she does poetry too, that says, "We are bent, not broken." And I want people to understand that too, that we are bent, not broken, and that even with all of the traumas I've had to go on through my life, and I'm crying here right now, like sobbing, I feel so much stronger in my life and able to face the challenges that happen every day. Like, things can just wipe you out each day. I have so many more tools and so much more knowledge that I've been able to like tackle those things and work through them and process them so much easier, because of the things that I've learned. And we're not we're not lost causes. Here I am sitting here in my 50s and still learning how to do this right, how to do this life right.
Yeah.
And I just don't want anyone to ever feel like they're a lost cause, or it's too late.
Yeah.
Because we can always learn and grow.
Thank you, Andrea. Seriously, that's such a beautiful message. You gave us some awesome resources, you were so vulnerable with sharing your stories and like what you've been through in your life and your challenges. And I thank you for that. Thank you for sharing what your healing journey has been like. And to just kind of like tie this all up together in a pretty little bow, I would love to hear like, what is your why?
I, in my patriarchal blessing, it says that um, I have, what is it, exceedingly great faith. And for me, that has what has pushed me forward, because I have had moments where I wanted to end it all. And God has shown up for me each time. And so I know my worth to Him. So that is why I stay and push forward, because He is the one with the foundation just holding me up.
Mm.
I wish that I could explain it in words, the strength of that. I know several people who have had to go through these challenges, and they have God wounds, what we call God wounds, because they're like, why did you do this to me? Why, God,
Mm.
did you do this to me? And for me, that has never been an issue. I have always believed that God is right there. I don't believe that God is the author of pain. I believe mortality is,
Mm.
but He is always there championing us and wanting us to push forward and do good. I believe that it's my purpose in life
Yeah.
to work through the things. For me, I guess that's my why.
Well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
being here and
thank
doing
you.
this. I know it's so vulnerable, but I really appreciate you and I love you so much. So, everything that Andrea talked about today, I'll have like links to literally everything just down below. And if there's any questions about what she asked, just send us a message and I'll get you information that you
Thank
need.
you.
So, thanks, Andrea. Love you.
We love you.